The thrill of our narrow escape from the opium den lingered in the air long after we had returned to the sanctuary of 221B Baker Street. The encounter had been a stark reminder of the dangerous world we had entered. A world where a single misstep could have fatal consequences. But for Holmes, the danger was merely a stimulant, a catalyst that sharpened his senses and focused his already formidable intellect. He had shed his disguise and was once again the familiar, hawk-like figure in the worn dressing gown, pacing the length of our cluttered living room like a caged predator. The information we had gleaned from the depths of the East End had provided him with the missing pieces of the puzzle. And now he was assembling them with a feverish intensity, his mind a whirlwind of deduction and synthesis. "It is all coming together, Watson," he declared, his voice ringing with a triumphant energy that defied the late hour. "The disparate threads of this affair are weaving themselves into a single, coherent tapestry of crime. A tapestry of scarlet, you might say, stained with the blood of past betrayals and the promise of future violence." He gestured towards the chart he had created, the complex web of names and connections that now seemed to hold the key to the entire mystery. "We have a secret society, the Crimson Shadow, born from a grievance of the past. We have its leader, the enigmatic and ruthless Colonel, whom I am now certain is Colonel Sebastian Moran. And we have the invisible hand of Professor Moriarty, pulling the strings from the shadows, manipulating this army of vengeful soldiers for his own nefarious purposes." He stopped his pacing and turned to me, his eyes burning with a cold, analytical light. "But what is the purpose, Watson? That is the question that remains. Is it merely to eliminate the officers involved in the Quetta payroll robbery, to tie up the loose ends of Moran's past? Or is there a larger game at play?" "Moriarty is not a man who deals in petty revenge. His ambitions are far grander. He is a chess master, and every move he makes is part of a larger strategy." He resumed his pacing, his mind grappling with the complexities of the problem. We must connect the past to the present. We must find the thread that links the events in India 2 decades ago to the disappearance of Lord Vance and the terrorizing of his wife. The answer, I am convinced, lies in the military records, in the official accounts of the Quetta affair. For the remainder of the night, Holmes immersed himself in his research. He sent a telegram to a contact at the War Office, requesting the complete service records of the Royal Munster Fusiliers for the period of the Second Afghan War. He then delved back into his own extensive archives, his collection of newspaper clippings, court records, and personal notes on the criminal underworld. As the first grey light of dawn began to filter through the fog-shrouded windows, a reply to his telegram arrived. It was a thick envelope containing a sheaf of official documents, a dry, factual account of the lives and careers of the men who had served in that ill-fated regiment. Holmes spread the documents out on the table, his eyes scanning them with an almost inhuman speed. He was searching for a pattern, a connection, a single detail that would illuminate the entire case. "Listen to this, Watson," he said, his voice low and intense. He began to read from one of the documents, a list of the officers who had served in the regiment. Colonel James Armitage, Commanding Officer, Major Jonathan Fairfield, Captain Sebastian Moran, Lieutenant Lord Henry Vance. He paused, his eyes fixed on the list. 4 officers, 4 men who were present at the time of the robbery. 4 men who were in a position of power and trust. And 4 men who, according to the official report, were instrumental in the investigation that followed. He picked up another document, a summary of the official inquiry into the robbery. The inquiry, led by Colonel Armitage himself, concluded that the robbery was the work of a local warlord, a man named Dost Mohammed. Several of Mohammed's men were captured and, under interrogation, confessed to the crime. The case was closed, the matter officially resolved. "But you do not believe that is the truth," I said. "The truth, my dear Watson," Holmes replied with a wry smile, "is a far more complex and interesting creature than the one presented in the pages of an official report. The truth is that the £50,000 vanished, and the only people who benefited were the ones who were supposed to be guarding it." He began to cross-reference the names of the officers with his own records. His knowledge of the London underworld proving to be a far more valuable resource than the official archives of the British Army. "Colonel Armitage," he mused, "retired from the army a year after the Quetta affair, citing ill health. He returned to England a wealthy man, far wealthier than a career soldier's pension could account for. He died 2 years ago, apparently of natural causes, though I now have my doubts." He moved on to the next name. "Major Fairfield. He also resigned his commission shortly after the war. He invested heavily in the stock market and became a prominent figure in the city. He is still alive, a respected and influential man, a pillar of the community." He paused, a grim look on his face. "And then we have our 2 main players. Lord Henry Vance, who inherited his title and his fortune, and has lived a quiet, respectable life, haunted by the ghosts of his past, and Colonel Sebastian Moran, who was cashiered from the army for cheating at cards, and who has since become one of the most dangerous men in London, a hired gun for the highest bidder." He looked up from his papers, his eyes gleaming with a sudden startling realization. "Do you see it, Watson? The pattern. The 4 men who were in a position to orchestrate the robbery. The 4 men who were responsible for the investigation. The 4 men who were the only ones to profit from the crime. They were not just colleagues. They were conspirators." The pieces of the puzzle were now falling into place with a terrifying clarity. "So the 4 officers stole the payroll themselves," I said, "and framed the local tribesmen for the crime." "Precisely," Holmes confirmed. "A classic case of greed and betrayal. They stole from their own men, from the soldiers who trusted them with their lives. And for 20 years, they have lived with their stolen fortunes, while the men they betrayed have lived with the shame and the poverty of their perceived incompetence." He leaned back in his chair, his theory now fully formed. "And now, the chickens have come home to roost. The common soldiers, the men who were cheated and disgraced, have found each other. They have formed a society, the Crimson Shadow, and they are seeking their revenge. They are hunting down the 4 officers one by one to exact their own brutal form of justice." The motive was now clear, a raw, primal desire for vengeance that had festered for 2 decades. "So, Lord Vance was the first target," I said. "Yes," Holmes replied, "and I fear he will not be the last. Major Fairfield is still alive, a fat and prosperous target, ripe for the plucking. And then there is the question of Colonel Moran himself. Why would he lead a society that is, in essence, hunting him? You said it was a misdirection, I reminded him. Indeed, Holmes said, his brow furrowed in thought. But what is the purpose of the misdirection? Is he simply using the society to eliminate his former partners, to claim the entirety of the stolen fortune for himself? Or is there something more? Something that involves his master, Professor Moriarty? He was about to elaborate on his theory when we were interrupted by the sharp ring of the doorbell. A moment later, Mrs. Hudson appeared with a telegram. It was from Lady Vance. Holmes tore it open and read it aloud, his voice grim. "Come at once," it read. "Another disturbance. More paint. I am terrified. Eleanor Vance." The urgency of the message was palpable. The crimson shadow had struck again. "There is no time to lose, Watson," Holmes said, grabbing his coat and his hat. "The game is escalating. Our enemies are growing bolder. We must return to Vance Manor immediately." As we hurried to hail a cab, my mind was racing. The crimson shadow was no longer just a symbol of a past crime. It was a living, breathing threat, a promise of violence that was being carried out with a chilling efficiency. During the journey, Holmes was uncharacteristically silent, his mind clearly working through the new developments. The second message from the Crimson Shadow, coming so soon after our visit, was a direct challenge, a sign that our involvement had been noted and was not welcome. When we arrived at Vance Manor, we were met by a distraught Lady Vance. Her composure was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. She led us to the library, a large, handsome room with a fine collection of leather-bound books. And there, on the wall above the fireplace, was the now familiar, horrifying symbol of the Crimson Shadow. It had been painted with the same crude but deliberate strokes, the same blood-red color. But this time, there was something else. Beneath the symbol, a single word had been scrawled: Fairfield. The message was clear, a chilling declaration of intent. They had dealt with Vance. Now they were coming for Major Fairfield. "They are not just taunting us, Watson," Holmes said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "They are communicating with us. They are telling us their next move. They are so confident, so arrogant, that they are laying their cards on the table." He turned to Lady Vance, his expression a mixture of pity and professional urgency. "Lady Vance, I must know, did your husband have any recent contact with Major Fairfield?" She shook her head, her eyes wide with confusion. "Not that I am aware of. They served together, of course, but I do not believe they have spoken in years. Henry, he did not like to be reminded of his time in the army. And yet, his past has come back to haunt him, and to haunt you." Holmes said gently, "This is no longer just about finding your husband, madam. It is about preventing another murder." He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a new intensity. "Watson, we must find Major Fairfield. We must warn him. He is in mortal danger." We left Vance Manor with a renewed sense of urgency. The Crimson Shadow was not just a society of vengeful soldiers. It was a machine of death, and it was already moving on to its next target. Back at Baker Street, Holmes immediately began to search for the whereabouts of Major Jonathan Fairfield. He consulted his extensive records, his network of informants, and the public directories. Within an hour, he had an address: a grand townhouse in Belgravia, one of the most exclusive and wealthy districts in London. "There is no time to lose," Holmes said, his voice grim. "We must go to him at once, but we must be careful. If the Crimson Shadow is watching him, they will be watching for us as well." We took a circuitous route to Belgravia, changing cabs twice to ensure we were not being followed. The townhouse was an imposing structure, a monument to the wealth and success of its owner. It was a fortress of respectability, but Holmes knew that no fortress was impregnable to a man with a 20-year-old grievance and a lust for revenge. We were admitted by a stern-faced butler who looked at us with suspicion. But the mention of an urgent matter of life and death was enough to grant us an audience with the master of the house. Major Jonathan Fairfield was a large, florid man in his late 50s, with a booming voice and a self-satisfied air. He was the very picture of a successful Victorian gentleman, a man who had clearly enjoyed the fruits of his labors, however ill-gotten they may have been. He received us in his study, a room filled with expensive furniture, hunting trophies, and the general clutter of a wealthy man's life. He seemed more annoyed than concerned by our sudden intrusion. "Holmes," he boomed, his voice full of skepticism. "The detective." "What on earth could be so urgent as to require your presence in my home at this hour?" "Your life, Major Fairfield," Holmes said, his voice cold and direct. "You are in grave danger. A society of men who believe you have wronged them is planning to kill you." Fairfield stared at him, his face a mixture of disbelief and indignation. "Kill me? Don't be ridiculous. I am a respected member of this community. I have no enemies." "You have more enemies than you can possibly imagine, Major," Holmes replied, his voice cutting through Fairfield's bluster. "Enemies who have been nursing a grievance for 20 years. Enemies who call themselves the Crimson Shadow." At the mention of the name, a flicker of fear appeared in Fairfield's eyes. The color drained from his face, and his blustering self-confidence seemed to evaporate. "The Crimson Shadow," he whispered, the name a ghost from a past he had tried to bury. "Yes," Holmes said, pressing his advantage. "They have already taken Lord Vance, and they have left a message, Major. Your name, scrawled on the wall of his library. You are their next target." Fairfield sank into a chair, his body trembling. The confident, successful man was gone, replaced by a frightened, guilty old soldier. "It was the payroll," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "The Quetta payroll. I knew it would come back to haunt us. I told Armitage, I told Vance, but they wouldn't listen." "Tell us everything, Major," Holmes said, his voice softening slightly. "It is your only hope." And so, the story came tumbling out, a sordid tale of greed and betrayal, confirming Holmes's theory in every detail. The 4 officers had indeed stolen the payroll, and they had framed innocent men for the crime. They had returned to England as wealthy men, their secret safe, or so they thought. "But now they've come for us," Fairfield moaned, his face buried in his hands. "They've come for their revenge." "Yes," Holmes said, "and they will not stop until they have it. That is why you must listen to me very carefully. You must not leave this house. You must not see anyone. You are a prisoner in your own home, Major. But it is a prison that may just keep you alive." He turned to me, his eyes filled with a new and startling realization. "Watson," he said, his voice low and urgent, "this is not just about revenge. It is about something more. The painting of the name, the open declaration of their next target. It is a deliberate act of psychological warfare. They are not just hunting their victims. They are terrorizing them. They are making them wait, making them suffer. He began to pace the room, his mind racing ahead, connecting the final pieces of the puzzle. And the symbol, the crimson shadow. It is not just a mark of vengeance. It is a marker for death. He stopped and looked at me, his face pale with the dawning of a terrible understanding. "My God, Watson," he whispered, "it is an execution list, and they're working their way down it, one name at a time. Vance, Fairfield, and then, who is next? Armitage is dead. That leaves only one name." The name hung in the air, unspoken but understood. The name of the man who was both the hunter and the hunted, the leader and the target. Moran, I breathed. "Precisely," Holmes said, his voice a grim whisper. "Colonel Sebastian Moran, the final name on the list, the architect of the crime, and the final victim of the revenge he himself has orchestrated." The full, horrifying scope of the plan was now clear. Moran was not just using the crimson shadow to eliminate his former partners. He was using them to stage his own death, to disappear from the world, to escape the clutches of Moriarty and the law. "It is a brilliant, diabolical plan," Holmes said, his voice a mixture of admiration and disgust. "He creates a society of vengeful soldiers, points them at his former comrades, and then, when the time is right, he will become their final victim. His death a tragic, but just end to a long and bloody story. He will vanish, a ghost, free to start a new life with his stolen fortune. The thread of Scarlet that had begun in the dust of India had now led us to the heart of a conspiracy that was as cunning as it was deadly. We were no longer just trying to save a single man. We were trying to stop a chain of murders, to unmask a villain who was hiding in plain sight, and to prevent a master criminal from disappearing into the shadows forever. The game had reached its most dangerous stage, and the next move was ours.